Hey everyone, what's up? This is Uri for Guerrilla Poker, recording from my new office. Hopefully the sound and everything is better. Still a few kinks to work out, but there should be an improvement. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing a high-stakes hand played at 5100 between Peter and Marcus. Hopefully I'm pronouncing the names correctly. Fairly interesting hand, so let's dive right into it. Marcus raises on a button to 2.5x. GTO approved size. Peter 3-bets to 1200, so a tad less than 5x, also GTO approved size, and Marcus calls. We get an ace-10-8 rainbow board. Peter starts out with a quarter pot c-bet. Now, whenever we see a board, we want to think about the range interactions, and generally speaking, seeing a quarter pot c-bet already can tell us, even without looking at the sim, that Peter thinks that this is worthy of betting range or close to it for a small bet. The thing that this allows you to do is kind of push your equity advantage without really splitting your range, because if you go with a big bet, what do you do with kings, queens, jacks, nines, right? Those have to check, and you need to protect the checking range. And then you have to check a lot, and that's what we call a polarized strategy. But by starting out with a small bet, we get to push our equity advantage and keep all our range kind of chunked together. And then we get to split into a polarized strategy on the turn. And this is something, as you guys know, I'm sure a lot of players prefer these days. So Peter goes with a small bet and Marcus goes for a small raise and Peter calls. Now, it's actually a bit rare to see. A lot of guys don't raise on a board like ace-10-8 rainbow. And it's interesting to think about, I guess, the range and the reason. So what would make sense for Marcus to raise? And here the first thing that's important to understand is Peter is betting his full range, more or less. So anything that can put in more money against Peter's full range is a reasonable candidate to raise. And that's actually quite a lot of hands. But again, due to his range disadvantage, there's this concept of, if Marcus has a strong hand, he wants to not split his range, similar to what we were saying about Peter, right? If Marcus splits his range and starts raising with his good hands on the flop, then his caller range becomes too weak and, you need to protect it and et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of guys simplify to not really raising. There's not that much money behind and you're in position, and I think that's perfectly fine. But if we're going to raise, it's important to understand that the hand classes that the range is built around are going to be ace-10, ace-8 suited, pocket 8s, pocket 10s, maybe some amount of ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack, which are not necessarily putting stacks in but are strong enough to raise. And then just throw in bluffs. And with bluffs, generally speaking, you want to block your opponent's top range and unblock his folding range. And there's a bunch of stuff going on. I've actually never explored this node, but I would guess that something like an 8 or a 10 to raise and then barrel off might make sense, and something completely disconnected from the board like some low pocket pair might make sense. Those and maybe some straight draw that's raising and then later on giving up. I like those are the things that come to mind for me. Yeah, we have a raise and a call. Peter calling again, he's basically calling a small bet, so he has to call insanely wide here. Definitely kings, queens, jacks, any pair, probably nines, any gut shot. Like, he just folds his trashy stuff pretty much, because this is like 1,000 into 4,600. But yeah, he calls, we get the 3 of hearts, so complete brick unless someone has ace-3 or pocket 3s, which is both are unlikely. Peter checks, and Marcus goes with a quarter pot bet, which Peter calls. Now, the quarter pot bet is a bit inappropriate in this scenario in terms of theory. Generally speaking, Marcus should be betting a polarized range, and then he wants to split his sizing to be even over both streets, which means bigger sizing than quarter pot here. Quarter pot would be if he has a large amount of hands that go one bet and then check back river, and that's not how the raising range is constructed and not how the board ran out. So I'd guess this should be more along the lines of half pot in terms of sizing. But yeah, he goes quarter pot, and it's tough to read into it. It's definitely a punishing size for Peter's gut shots. It's a milky size for his overpairs. Like it's an appropriate size in terms of if the other guy's draws are all king, queen, king, jack, maybe queen, jack. It's a tough size for him to face at the stack to pot ratio. So be that as it may, Petter calls. We get the 5 of hearts river. So backdoor hearts came in. Those are a part of both ranges, but not a very large part. Petter checks. Marcus goes into the tank and goes all in for roughly 2/3 pot. Petter snap calls and we have a showdown. And Petter shows ace of hearts, queen of clubs. Certainly a hand that's pure calling in theory. And you could try to think, does it actually chop with value like by the river? Can Marcus just put in stacks with ace queen? And I wouldn't be surprised if the answer is yes, because Petter is probably supposed to fast play, especially versus the turn quarter pot with some of his hands that beat ace queen, to not let Marcus go like quarter pot into check behind with something like, I guess, ace 5, ace 4. It doesn't really make sense, like I said, the turn bet size to me. Well, we'll look at the solver soon. But yeah, ace of hearts, for sure this hand is calling and probably chopping with some value. And Marcus shows down actually a very surprising hand. I'm sure it's very difficult to guess if you haven't seen the hand. He shows down pocket 9s with a heart. So very shocking hand for me to see. This doesn't make sense to me. It's hard to imagine that this combo is raisable on the flop. It feels just the hand strength that wants to call and alt raise. And once you raise the flop, why would you bet the turn with 9 specifically? Again, you beat your opponent's 8s. You block his 9's folding range. If he has something like jack 9, I don't know, like this makes no sense to me. And by the river, you know, your opponent probably has queen jack sometimes, so you do have some showdown value. He might even have jack 9, which you block. So it just seems like the wrong combo all around. I would agree you probably don't win by the river. So the river seems the most okay, but 9s feels very off to me. So we're going to hop into a solver and look at a similar spot, see what we get. So yeah, we start out and we see a 75% c-bet frequency, so close to range, and certainly ace-queen c-betting. And like I was saying, the checking range is going to have some hands like 9s or 6s, 7s, jacks, queens, kings, and protect it, where the hands that make most sense to protect it with are maybe something like aces or 10s. So yeah, you can't c-bet everything, but we're getting close to it. And a lot of guys simplify to betting everything. And interestingly enough, in position should raise 24% of the time, because apparently against this big blind range, and you know, the 10 and the 8, so he's raising 8s and 10s and 10-8, and ace-king, ace-8 suited and ace-10 suited mixed. Now, why mixed? Like I was saying, we have to still defend our calling range. We can't split completely and raise all our good hands. And then, like I was saying, so I think I got this one kind of accurate. Ace-queen, ace-jack, ace-9 kind of mixed raising, because they can build a pot even if they're not looking to go all in. We have some gut shots. We have some 10x and small amount of 8x, which makes sense again, because 10 is the more relevant blocker here, because out of position is more 3-betting 10s and ace-10. And then some low pocket pairs, just not worth much and not interacting with the board. So we have a raise, and Petter decides to call with ace-queen, which will be the most common play. So far, so good. Nothing special going on. And we get the 3 of hearts turn. Petter is going to check. And here I was saying that the quarter pot bet feels wrong to me, but the solver seems to disagree. Like I was saying, it does make sense for something like ace-9. Oh, wait. Does 9s raise? 9s does raise sometimes. Surprising to me. But yeah, apparently it's just about weak enough to do that. So yeah, 3 of hearts. And we barrel a lot, including with 9s. And the quarter pot bet is for ace-9 and ace-jack and an ace-queen sometimes. And presumably it lets you bet those hands and check back, maybe something like pocket jacks. And yeah, we just barrel a ton of everything on this turn. So assuming we go quarter pot, Petter's supposed to check raise. This is what I was saying, ace-king and pocket 10s and pocket 8s. And so your ace-queen might end up being a bit nutted by the river. But yeah, he clicks call. We get the 5 river. He checks again. And This was the street I was thinking was most okay with nines, and it is okay with nines. Actually, the whole hand is okay with nines. But yeah, after the quarter pot turn, in position, gets to shove river, his value range is not really going to be very thin. All the ace nine, ace jack, ace queen that went third pot are now checking back, or quarter pot are now checking back, and we're just going flushes and two pair plus, and this is why the ace of hearts was so relevant. So if we go ahead and shove here, Peter's supposed to, generally speaking, call most of his ace queen, but certainly call whenever he has the ace of hearts because he beats his opponent's value range. And bluffs for in positions, 3s, 4s, 6, 7, 9s, some king, queen, king, jack with a heart. Everything makes sense except, like, why is 9s betting, and what was wrong about my analysis of me thinking that 9s is terrible? So if we kind of head back to the flop and we ask, how does 9s raising make sense? So the first answer we get is that I was saying 9s is a good hand strength to call, and the solver is saying, no, you know what, 9s is so weak here, it's actually worth right around 0. And this kind of should shift your entire perception about how to play the hand. Because a hand that's worth, a bit more than 0 is generally not a good candidate to raise because you're torching your showdown value. But if you have 0 showdown value, right, then 9s here is, as a call, worth the same as any trash. It's just worth the same as a fold. 9s is worthless as a call. So in that case, raising is an option. And we try thinking about blockers and removal effects and showdown value. And then, if it's worth roughly 0, I can see throwing in a raise. I'm not in love with it in terms of removal effects because I was saying Jack 9 suited, but does Jack 9 suited 3-bet? It does. And maybe it continues, maybe blocking it on the flop is not the worst thing. So yeah, we raise, we get called. 3 of hearts. And again, it's important to look at the EVs. So what's the EV of checking back 9s on the turn? And here the answer is it's actually quite high. The EV of checking back 9s is somewhere between 8 to 10 big blinds because not only do we sometimes spike a 9, but sometimes if we go check, check, it's like a 6 river. Our opponent is forced, again, remember, ranges are wide. He's going to check down something like king, queen, or his 8x. And then he'd go check. We check back our 9s, and our EV would be 18 big blinds. So yeah, checking back is real. So why do you barrel with 9s? Generally speaking, to barrel in one of these spots, we need to create this kind of nice situation, which sometimes happens in poker, where we bet 9s and our opponent is going to call us with queen jack and king queen of hearts that we beat. And he's going to call us with maybe some 9-8 and 7-8 that we beat. He's also going to fold some better hands. So in this case, he's going to fold something like kings, and he's going to fold some jack 10s. And when you get this situation where your opponent is calling with some worse hands and folding some better hands, then betting these kind of unintuitive combos that should naturally be checks becomes kind of okay. So yeah, 9s betting on the turn, I guess, makes sense in this weird solver world. And the issue in a real world situation is, solver is kind of balancing all these things perfectly, but it's very easy for a person to make betting 9s on the turn either very good or very bad by switching things up. Now remember, our value range was based around 8s and 10s. So calling 8x out of position might be very attractive because he's blocking our value. And then we're like, oh, let's bet 9s. That's kind of the sick thing going on here. So yeah, we get to the 5 river, out of position checks. And here I put the 5 of diamonds rather than the 5 of hearts because here 9s has more showdown. And on the 5 of diamonds, 9s is actually checking back more. But again, it's this really weird effect where you still shove sometimes. Now, why do you shove on the 5 of diamonds, on the 5 of hearts? What's the idea? Remember, if we check and we look at in positions, equity with 9s, it's not 0. It's 7% on something like the 5 of hearts. And yet 9 still shoves. Despite, 7% of a big pot, this is worth big blinds. Generally speaking, we give up with hands that never win. But here we're giving up with a hand that's going to win sometimes. How's it going to win? Well, we bet quarter pot on a turn. So our opponent on the river still has some just open-enders with queen jack, and he still has some 8x. So yeah, we just win sometimes, but we're gonna see this effect again where we shove and our opponent's probably doing this weird thing where he calls worse, or our nines are somehow really amazing blockers. One of the two would have to happen. So if we go 5 of diamonds, for example, so not the heart, we shove. Yeah, it looks like our opponent, of course, can never call an 8 because we're shoving nines, right? And I don't see him calling any worse. So if he calls, our equity with nines is 0, right? So why would we shove nines? It's very unintuitive, and the answer somehow lies in magical blockers, right? Like somehow nines are interacting with the calling and the folding range in a way that makes it plus EV to shove nines. But whenever you see something like this, I would tend to say these inputs are so sensitive to what exactly people are doing. Like, look at this response. Pure folding kings, queens, jacks, and then playing the kickers in a certain way with your ace-x, and what did you re-raise on the turn? Everything's so accurate here. I would highly advise against ever making these kind of plays. It's a sicko play for sure. I'm very surprised to see someone find this. But yeah, I'd say just check back and, maybe your opponent's calling an 8 more, maybe he's calling queen jack more. Like, there's no reason to go into this mixed node. The EVs are the same. It's crazy town to do this, unless you think your opponent's stationing you with an 8, and then it's amazing. And yeah, let's wrap up here. Crazy hand, crazy solver, world dynamics. Remember, if you're calling with an 8 because you think your opponent's bluffing and he shows up with 9s, that's one sick thing to happen. Of course, it doesn't happen in the solver because the solver sees what the other guy is doing. But yeah, really, really sick hand. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time.